Hey everyone, welcome to another fabulous Sales Hacker webinar. As we are all entering, we want to hear who you are, so make sure you go to the chat, introduce yourself, tell us where you are coming from. I'm coming from the beautiful Lubbock, Texas. Yes, there are real tumbleweeds here. It's pretty fun. Andrew, where are you coming from again? Oh, Austin.
Texas, already in the chat.
Beat me to it.
Hello, everyone.
Oh, we've got a lot of Texans in here. Hey, Greg, coming from San Antonio. Traverse City. Am I Minnesota or Michigan? I'm not sure. Well, it's great to see y'all. Dave, where are you coming from again?
Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada.
Oh yes, Vancouver. Good old Vancouver. What is it getting cold yet up there?
No, it's not. It's supposed to be, I think, 85, 90 degrees this weekend, and we're having a nice warm summer. It doesn't cool down here until mid to late September. And even in Vancouver, we might get snow once or twice a year.
Golly. Are you getting any backlash from all the fires that are happening?
Well, just a lot of concern about the people that are in those communities, that's for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, hopefully it doesn't spread. I know that's a bit of a distance, but hopefully it doesn't come your way. And Kamara, you are joining us from probably the most beautiful city so far.
I am in Irvine, California, so the OC.
The OC. Did you ever watch that show growing up?
You know, I didn't. It was a slight little bit before my time, I'd like to say, but I should. Now that I'm here, I should. Although I did, I'm from Santa Barbara, and I've watched the Santa Barbara show, which is pretty ancient. So there's that.
Didn't know about that. I'll have to check that out.
That's super old.
Well, hey everyone, welcome. I know we've just had almost 100 people join on before, during these conversations. So just a reminder, this is going to be an amazing session. And we are talking all about demos that don't suck and how you can shorten your sales cycle and how you actually know what's happening to your pipeline because of what you're going to learn today. It's going to be a great session. Just a few housekeeping reminders. First and foremost, make sure that your chat is turned to panelists and attendees. We're going to be asking questions. We want to hear from you. We want to see what's happening, what you're thinking, any questions that you may have for us. We want to see it. So make sure that it's panelists and attendees. Secondly, this webinar will also be recorded. So you're going to get an email within 24 hours. We always get emails as soon as the session ends. Don't worry, as long as you registered, which if you're here, you did, you're going to get an email from us with all the great information, the recording, everything. And then lastly, if you don't want other people to see what your question is, drop it in the Q&A box at the very bottom of your screen. You can answer, or you can ask it anonymously, you name it, it's there for you. So to kick it off, we are going to start off with introductions. And what I'd love to hear from our amazing panelists, you already told us where you live, but who you are, what you do, and what your favorite part of the sales cycle is. Whether it be cold calling, demo, discovery, close, getting your commission check, you name it. So, Andrew, I'll start with you.
Great. Thanks, Katie. And everyone, if you want to drop in the chat whether you think Dave's background is real or fake on the brick there. I was having a hard time, so we'll see what people have to say about that. But coming in from Austin, Texas here, I'm in enterprise sales at outreach.io. Been with the company for about 5.5 years. My favorite part of the sales cycle, I would say about 99% of people would agree with me here, is when the deal closes, for obvious reasons. But also love the discovery process, right? Because that's whether you figure out or not. You figure out or don't figure out whether it's going to be a good deal or not. So, and we'll get more into that today. And thanks, Katie, for having me kick it off here.
I love it. And I love that you started that question because we've got some interesting answers in here. So, yeah, keep telling us if you think the background is real or fake. I like the background is real, Dave is fake. Are you pulling a little Tupac? Are you just in our imagination.
Just a hologram. Just a hologram.
Dave, tell us what you do and what your favorite part of the sales cycle is.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the founder and CEO of Replays. Super excited about this chat today. Really hoping a bunch of people jump in and ask a bunch of questions and participate on all things demo related and discovery related. Yeah, I've been a sales leader in tech for years. Started Replays 2.5 years ago. What we do all day, every day is have professional coaches who actually just do this as a side hustle. They're usually awesome sales reps, sales leaders who are listening to discovery and demo calls. So all we do is coach on those to our Replays best practices. This is my favorite topic. My favorite, yes, I have to agree with Andrew. Obviously, the best part of the sales cycle is the close, but the most interesting is discovery. I enjoy that part a lot. It's not the same as the high you get when you close a deal, but what you learn is fascinating in putting all those pieces together. And I will give a final sort of verdict on this. It is fake. So this has become a bit of a moniker. I used to work in this place called Gastown in Vancouver, very tech startup-y area that's, was founded 150 years ago or something like that. And a lot of brick there. So when I went virtual, I'm like, I need something that feels like the startup world I'm used to. Hence the brick background.
I love that. I like the backstory to it as well. It's not just, I found this on Amazon. I thought I should have this. So great story there. Love that. Kamara, what about yourself?
Hi, everyone, and thanks for having me. I'm excited about today's chat. This should be really interesting. So feel free, open forum. I'd love to hear everyone's questions and thoughts and opinions as well. Make it really interactive. I am in Orange County, as I mentioned before, and I am a senior account executive at a brand new startup called DemoStack. I focus on enterprise and strategic sales. I've been doing this for many years. And since they all stole my thunder with the close being the best part of the sales cycle, I gotta say, negotiation's pretty fun. That's where I think I get the most creative in terms of how I structure deals, and also just listening to what the requirements and needs are and where people will bend or where we can kind of meet them in the middle. It's really fun and it's an engaging part of the sales cycle. And of course, if you do it well, then it closes. So all good things.
I love that. Awesome. Well, it's so important to know because as many of you know, we are all talking about getting to the close today with successful discovery calls, demos, you name it. So before we kick off, we're actually going to start off with our first poll, and it's what best describes you. We want to make sure that this session is geared towards exactly who's here, whether you're SDRs, AEs, managers, directors. I know it's crazy to have an SDR, but some companies have SDRs run discovery and demo calls, so it's fair to ask. So we're just going to give it about 10 more seconds. In this way, we can really get helpful nuggets of information based off of your role. Great to see some enablement folks in here. I'm a huge fan of that. So thank you for showing up. Got some VPs, directors, managers. Here we go. And I will share the poll. So we've got overwhelmingly a huge majority of closers, which is great. So we're excited that y'all are here. Today, we're really going to be talking about how are we customizing our experience? How are we asking the right questions? Do we bother with doing free trials? And in what industries does that work best in? What are some things that we need to be aware of whenever we talk about free trials with our prospects? And then if we're a sales leader or even someone wanting to go into leadership, what are some resources that you can bring back to your teams to really get them feeling comfortable, feeling confident, and knowing what a good demo looks like? So as we talk about demos, one of the polls that we had kind of decided on that would be kind of fun to really dig into is understanding how confident are you in actually delivering a demo, and in your humble opinion, how good are you at actually delivering that? So let's kick off our conversation with this, because we're really going to get into how are you planning to be more confident? Are you confident? There's a lot of 8s in here. Let's get about 10 more seconds in here. I was horrible at doing demos. I was always very uncomfortable whenever I first started. So in my humble opinion, I'm not great at that necessarily. So here we go. Wow. There's a lot of 8 and 9s and how great you are at delivering demos. I think you might have forgotten the humble part here. So okay. Well, this is going to be super helpful as we guide our conversation today. Many of you are very confident and very good at delivering demos. So we'll see as we keep the conversation going today. So really, one of the first things we wanted to talk about is, what does a good demo experience even look like? Andrew, I know you've got a lot of ideas about this. You were probably on a demo this morning. So tell us, what does it even look like? Where do you start whenever you build a good experience?
So that's a very loaded question. I think, for the demo experience, a good demo experience starts with great discovery, right? So I think really, we want to get to the demo, we want to show the product, right? And I think a mistake I really made early in my career was, wanting to get to the demo as well and show how cool all the widgets were and all the buttons were and all that, right? But in wanting to show everything. But in discovery, I think what you learn is how to create one main idea, one theme, and one takeaway for the demo that's coming up. Why that's important is because it's always better, just logically, humans want things to be simple. If you focus on one thing and have one very sound use case thought out that you've come up with in discovery versus 6 diluted use cases that don't really hit at all with the prospect. So whenever I think about a demo, to keep it simple, is one, I need to do great discovery in order to make sure that demo is set, and then 2, ensure that that demo is going to be one specific use case and tie into that one theme or one problem they're trying to solve. And if I can't tie into one problem, I don't know what the problem is, right? I'm just going to be throwing stuff on the wall. So that's a big one for me.
I love that. Absolutely love that. Kamara, what would you add to that?
I think I take it a step further too. I fully am on board with narrowing scope and focusing on one thing, how you're problem solving and really giving a solution to a challenge that a prospect faces. I take it a step further and actually tailor the demo using the discovery that I've done, showcasing not just specific to the use case, but features that actually make sense in accordance with the use case and giving those problem solving sorts of bits and pieces, and ultimately ROI. So really tailoring the content and what I'm showing within the demo according to the use case is what I do. And it tends to really resonate because then the audience, it makes sense. It's not just a generic overview or tour where they really can't understand how this would even benefit them in the long run.
Absolutely. Well, something that both of you mentioned was discovery. There's this concept, analysis paralysis. Dave, can you kind of speak to this of how much discovery is too much discovery?
I think that there's no one answer. It's a feel that you get over time as you're understanding the buyer's journey specific to mapping that specific to what you're selling. I think it's super important to have a list of questions, even if you're a very experienced seller. I do this. I have a list of questions, and understanding those questions by persona. So if you've got the CFO on, probably asking different questions than if the CMO is on, or maybe both are on. And so you're wanting to really cater your questions to that specific audience, so you can understand based on their subject matter expertise and their needs. I think that what I will make a general statement of the thousands upon thousands of discovery and demos that we've seen at replays, in general, what we see is discovery is not done enough. It's 1 or 2 questions, then a rep usually will get uncomfortable thinking, oh, I'm just making them feel uncomfortable because I'm asking too many questions, or they feel like I'm robotic and asking them 20 questions. And the reality is they then jump into a real general demo. And they're not actually catering the demo to the needs of the prospect. And we really encourage people to think of it as not a demo. It's a conversation with another human being, supported probably by a demo if there's a fit.
Absolutely. One thing that you really focused on for a few minutes there was talking about the time that we spend on our discovery. So we actually have a poll because we want to know, how much time are you actually spending on your discovery before you even dive into the demo. Because you're right. I think so often with sellers, it's so easy to think, oh, I heard a buying sign, let's jump into this, instead of taking the time to figure out a little bit more, digging a little bit more deeper, so we can be more relevant, like what Rajan had put into the chat over there. Great insights. Okay, just a few more seconds. I'm curious, if you put 21 minutes, drop in the chat what questions you ask, because I'm curious. You know, I don't know if there's necessarily a right or wrong time to spend on a discovery call, but I would be worried about if I spent an exorbitant amount of time that I might lose my prospect.
Katie, I'll also comment on that. We've got what I would consider a pretty straightforward process, and our discoveries are 20 to 30 minutes.
Wow, that's awesome. I like Jake's. He says he spends time qualifying and getting that commitment to the next steps. Okay. Well, what would you say to those folks that did the 6 to 10 or the 11 through 15? I mean, that's over half of the attendees here.
Well, my 2 cents on that is, of course, it depends on the nature of the sell. If we're talking a more enterprise type of sell or strategic ACVs, like 100 grand or more, maybe even 50 grand or more, yeah, we're going to want to make that discovery longer than 15 minutes. But if you're in a transactional type environment, and it might be under 30-day close, or maybe a 1 or 2 call close, sure, a 5 to 10 minute discovery, completely acceptable. If you're doing that typical 30 to 40 minute transactional style sell to an SMB, where ACV is 4 to 7K, and you're wanting to really have a 30 to 40 minute call where a third of that's discovery and the rest is catering your presentation to their needs.
That's awesome. Very, very insightful. And we have a lot of attendees here sharing such great insights in the chat as well. Of, we're making sure that we're really understanding what those needs are, figuring out, not just do our products check these boxes for them, but how will this help them long term? What does this look like? And really creating the goals for those conversations. Yeah, absolutely amazing. And I think you're so spot on with it being really dependent on what type of sale, what type of industry. Andrew, what do you think are some of the best questions to ask in a discovery call?
Oh, that depends on the business, right? And one thing I just want to highlight is the best questions to ask are related to where the prospect is at in their journey, right? So if someone has implemented your solution before, knows it front and back, and is like, I know I want this, your discovery questions are going to be a lot different than for someone who's never heard of your product before, right? So in terms of what questions, to ask, this is going to be vanilla advice, but it's always going to be open-ended questions, but it's not the question content, it's questions that align with where they're at. And that's the big one. And going back to that, discovery really never stops, right? Even if you're in a transactional sale versus an enterprise sale, you're constantly doing discovery. Even when you're on a demo, you're still discovering stuff on that demo. And even when you close them, you're still discovering stuff in order to expand on different departments, scale with them as they grow as a company, right? So I think the mindset that I have, reps on my side over at Outreach really get in their brain is that you're always trying to do discovery / find intel, and intelligence is what you use as leverage to get to where you need to go. Directors, VPs, C-suite, right? And the more information you can gather, the more potential leverage you're going to have to go to these people about problems that you can help solve.
Those are great. I mean, wow, I feel like we could spend a whole conversation on figuring out how do we position ourselves as reps into learning more, and what does that conversation look like? And I know we are actually going to kind of touch on that a little bit later, of how do we continue asking these questions without it being a horrible interrogation. So we'll cover some of the tactfulness around that. Actually, let's just jump into that now. And Kamara, what do you think? What is some advice for those reps who have that list of questions to ask because sales enablement gives it to us, and we don't know how to ask it tactfully, or we don't know how to weave it into a conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of daunting when you have a list of questions and then you feel the need to go check every single one off and have a full and complete answer. But at the end of the day, you're selling to another human, and it's that human connection that gets you the trust. And in my experience selling enterprise and strategic, even if it's a long sales cycle with a high dollar amount, I treat the prospect the same as I would as if it was a really small transaction. And it's creating that connection in order for them to trust me to then take those next steps and answer the more detailed questions regarding how they want to buy software or why. So it's not necessarily just technical discovery or use case discovery, problem discovery, and what you do in a sales cycle. It's also learning more about the individual and perhaps how your software, whatever product you're selling, will benefit them in their role today as well. So that's a big thing that I try to hone in on is, okay, where are you in the sales cycle? What are you looking to buy for? And asking those open-ended questions. But also, if you solve this problem, what impact would it have for you in your role today? And typically, I learn way more than I would just by asking general discovery questions. I learn about how the technology will help them advance their career or open up new roles. And it all of a sudden grows into a much larger conversation where you can glean all of that information and use it to progress your sales cycle.
Absolutely. Excuse me, Dave, what would you add to that?
I think it is a common thing that we hear from reps all the time, which is, and very senior account executives who've been selling for years, they admit, hey, I know I'm not spending enough time on discovery, but it's because I just don't want to wear out this poor prospect of mine. And we give them some very helpful tips that completely change the game for them. And it's things like, number one, we all know we want to do an agenda at the beginning of the call, right? And usually a mutually agreed upon plan where I think it's important to let the prospect know that we're really talking just to establish fit today. A perfectly fine outcome, as Josh Broad says all the time, of this call might be that there's no fit, and that's cool, right? And it just kind of, I think, takes the pressure off of the prospect right away. And then I think in that agenda saying, the first handful of minutes here, we find that it's super important to really understand your specific current snapshot, because I don't want to just give you a general demo. I don't want to give you our general sort of slides. I want to cater it specifically to what you want at the end of this discussion if we think there's a fit. And so what you're doing is you're sharing up front. You're setting the expectation that you're going to ask some questions. You're telling them why it's important and valuable to them. And so that's, I think, step one. Step two is make it a give and take. We all know the importance of customer stories, sharing social proof, and it's okay to weave those in during discovery, right? When they're like, oh man, yeah, I tell you, our sales team is just really struggling with lead gen right now. And specifically, we were at 80% of target for SQLs last quarter with our SDR team. And it's like, oh, wow. And then want to obviously dive into second level pain and deeper pain there. But, if you've already been asking questions for 9 minutes, it's okay to say, I get it. And we hear that all the time. It reminds me of this story of this customer who actually boarded with us probably 9 months ago. And they came to me with a similar problem. They said almost word for word what you said. Now, fast forward to today, I mean, they utilized our solution, and now they're like literally 120% of target consistently. And it's just through deploying the blah, 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 right? And so it's okay to weave in stories, because then if I'm the prospect, I forgot that you're asking me questions. I'm engaged in the story you're telling me. And so making it some deposits in there, some give and take. Then the other tip I would recommend is, and this really works well, is to say, especially if you can tell they're kind of getting antsy, be like, I really have to thank you for bearing with me in all these questions. Please just trust me that this is for your benefit. I just have a few more, and then I can really customize what I'm about to show you. When you do it, when you take those best practices, it's really tough for it to go off the rails.
Yeah, I really like that, talking about setting that agenda with them, going through expectations, and just being very disarming of, hey, let's figure this out. And if it works, it works. And if not, that's okay too. Joel asked a great question, and Kamara, it looks like you've got some great responses, but I'd love for you to dig a little bit deeper about what it's like whenever you have a product that most people don't even know of. And so it's just a very unique situation of what that conversation looks like, and if it does change your approach.
It definitely does. It's not as prescriptive of an approach as I've had at other companies I've worked for, where technology it's a space where people understand it and there's a clear need. I'm selling for DemoStack. This is a brand new technology in the demo experience platform space. So it's not even defined. I mean, we're building it as we are selling it. Everything is moving forward at a very fast pace. But really, it's educating prospects because they come to us with a need, or I'm outbounding to them, just seeing if they need improvements to how they demo today. And more often than not, it's that a lot of companies don't have the ability for their reps to demo. So it's educating. It's educating on what the solution provides, but also not necessarily causing them to completely pivot from their current sales process, understanding where the gaps are in their sales process today and where our technology could fit in and plug in those gaps and perhaps even make it a little bit more efficient than it is today. So that's sort of where these motions, sorry about that, that's my dog being extra loud in the background. But yeah, I do change the approach. It's a lot more discovery up front. So I would say I am in the boat of spending about 20 minutes on discovery and education just to understand, where their head's at and what they're looking to solve for, since it's so new.
I really like your emphasis on spending that time in discovery, because that's the biggest thing. And even in community, we talk about this all the time of sometimes people don't really know what they want. They know that they need something, but they're not sure what it looks like. So I'm sure you have a lot of conversations around figuring out, is this even the right tool? Is this even the right realm that you need to be looking in as a potential customer?
That's sort of where the trusted advisor approach comes in. Because, once you build that rapport and you've asked the questions about them and their needs and what they're doing today, guiding them towards the solution and presenting it in a way that makes sense for their use cases or their potential use cases is really helpful. And then if they trust you, that education that you provide is really what takes them to that next stage in the sales cycle.
Absolutely. Rajan added a really great comment here: hosting a webinar and educating your target prospect about new product, the new tech, and talking about the challenges. That's a great resource as well. So one of the questions during our prep call for this session, we had spent some time talking about how it can be so awkward for reps. You have all these questions and you want to get all the right information and you want to get it all in the right timing and in a smooth and tactful conversation where you're still building relationships. But one of the things I was really curious about is there a specific question that you are able to ask that will actually illuminate a lot of information and lead to more conversation instead of just interrogation? So I would love, and Dave, I'll start with you since you're off mute. I would love to hear from our panelists. What's that one question that really helps provide a lot of insight?
I think it depends partly on whether it's an inbound lead or outbound generated lead. And, I can empathize with what Joel's asking there in terms of, Replays is a first to market solution. So it's like first you're educating and then you're on the need specific to, call coaching. And then you're talking about why they should go with you. So, I think I'd like to hear, it'd be interesting to hear what Kamara and Andrew have to say. And then I'll weigh in on this one.
Yeah, so I'm as you introduce me, Dave, I'm gonna introduce my best friend named Ted. And who Ted is tell me, explain to me, describe to me, right? So anytime they give you some piece, and I got this from improv actually, shout out to anyone here who's done improv. But whenever they give you a piece of information, take that as a yes and tell them to elaborate on it. That's the easiest way. People love to talk, right? So if you just remember, my best friend Ted, tell me, explain to me, describe to me, that's the easiest way for me to get people to elaborate, right? Because if you ask one question and they give you a little, you can go down, you can take that one thing they gave you and you can have a whole conversation around that, I'm sure. If not, then it's not a big enough problem, right? Or you didn't ask the right question. So if you know you're on track there, Ted is the best way. It's like the 5 whys of Toyota, but asking why for me seems kind of like there's, it's a little rough around the edges, like why, right? And kind of annoying, to be frank. So a nicer way is introducing the Ted, right? And tell them to explain exactly what they said, and they'll go in detail. And then from there, you'll have some other questions that probably pop in your head if you know your market, if you know your persona, on what you should be asking. Yeah.
I love that. I actually just wrote TED down because I've never heard that before. So everyone make sure you wrote that down. That's awesome.
My best friend.
Kamara.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much to both Andrew and Dave's point. It depends on whether you went inbound, whether you went outbound, who you're speaking to. But the open-ended questions, I mean, this is tried and true. This is something that I've learned from my very first sales job, even outside of tech sales, that asking open-ended questions is the best way. The thing that helps me, and I think regardless of the segment I've been selling into, has kind of opened up the conversation in a nice way and set the stage nicely, is asking not necessarily why, but what made you agree to take this call with me? If it is an outbound prospect that I'm speaking to, if it is inbound, similarly, what made you reach out to us today? And then going a bit further and then prompting them to give you more information and expand upon that thought, just like Andrew just mentioned with the TED approach, which I'm also stealing because I've never heard that before. So I really like that.
I love those questions. I think they're bang on. And the difference between inbound and outbound, what we see people mistake a lot of the time, some of the gotchas, is in an outbound generated lead, they'll treat it the same as an inbound. And they'll be like, so what are your pain points? Like, what are you talking about? You called me. Like, so this is why I say it depends. In an inbound generated one where there's sort of a hypothesis of need you already have, you might ask, really love to understand specific to blah, like what's keeping you up at night? Right. And that I love asking. I always get a very interesting answer from that. If it's an outbound generated lead, I'll give them a few categories to choose from. And I'll say, based on the marketing leaders that we talk to, specific to our solution, it really seems like it's one of these three categories that's really driving them nuts, or a combination. So between A, B, and C, are any of those just really keeping you up at night? And then that way you're throwing up a hypothesis that it could be A, B, or C. And more often than not, they'll go, oh yeah, actually it's C. Like A and B are fine, but C is just driving me nuts. And boom, there's where you start your discovery. Now you start going down the funnel, asking the open-ended questions, digging deeper on the pain. What we see reps mistake is they'll assume that A, B, and C are a problem, and they'll spend equal time on that in their demo. Whereas if we find out in the beginning that C is really the issue, then spend freaking like 80% of your demo on C and don't show them much about A and B.
Yeah, that's amazing. We've got a lot of great comments in here. People just absolutely agreeing. Sean, I love this quote. The wise man doesn't give the right answers. He poses the right questions. And I think that really resonates to exactly what you were asking or saying, Dave, is, making sure that you're asking the right questions and also giving them an opportunity to answer it. So absolutely amazing. So we've spent a lot of time, almost 40 minutes so far, talking about creating a better customer experience by really understanding what is it that they need, what is it that they think they need, what do they actually need, what does that conversation look like, how do we make sure we're not interrogating, what are some good questions and strategies to really allow for a better conversation. Now let's talk about trials. We love free trials. We're all fans of them, but we all hate entering our email and then getting all these spam calls. We all hate that. But I think one of the biggest things I want to talk about is, why do we offer trials? When should we offer them? And how do we know if a trial is going to work out well? So Andrew, why don't you kick us off here of what do you think whenever you think of free trials? When do you even put this into play? Do you put this into play?
My one piece of advice on free trials, again, this is the enterprise perspective, is don't do them if you don't have to. Don't do it. That would be mine there. But of course, if you have to do them, this in itself, there should be a whole masterclass on this, because this in itself is starting a whole nother deal cycle, in my opinion, right? Like when you do it, I'm talking like a true like enterprise pilot where you have users in there, you have success metrics, you have a time frame, you have executive alignment, you have all this stuff. It's a whole nother beast. So I can spend an hour talking about that, but I would say, all the success of a pilot is going to come from the preparation you do in the pilot, right? Or before the pilot even starts, right? And I would say in order to make that successful, there's a couple of things you're going to need. One, if you're going to do a pilot and you agree to do it, you have to get something back, right? Because it's going to take resources on your team, whether it's ProServe or customer success team, whatever. And that agreement could be a number of things. That agreement can typically be, hey, we need exec alignment, or we need paperwork done beforehand. So if we hit these success metrics, you agree to buying X, Y, and Z. And another thing is ensuring that you have the right people utilizing the product in the pilot, right? That's another big one, right? And again, that's all the prep work. Because if you don't have that down, then once you get it in the hands of people, if you don't have all this set, it's not going to be or go well. So I can dig into any one of those if you'd like, Katie, but that's just a real high level on my take on pilots.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know we're going to spend a good amount of time on this, so I'm sure we're going to check some of those boxes of things, get a little deeper in. Dave, what do you think about these? And when do you see reps oftentimes going to the free trial as that safety vest?
Yeah, we do see that as a gotcha, especially for newer reps. They will default to the trial unnecessarily, too early in the sales cycle. Often, I think they could have actually closed the deal on that call or next call, talking about on a transactional style sale, right? Rather than defaulting to that trial. You have to ask yourself, what's the purpose of the trial? What is it about the value that they're not understanding from your previous conversations that trial is going to give them? And in larger enterprise deals where a POC is necessary, yeah, hey, absolutely. But use it as a last resort and take the best practices that Andrew mentioned. It's important to have the right stakeholders there and accountability on timeline, right? We see reps all the time saying, yeah, let's just do this trial. I'll touch base with you after, as opposed to, okay, our process is let's kick off this trial. And this is again for larger enterprise deals, but let's spell out all the terms and conditions that if you're happy, that we're going to move forward and you're ready to sign by X date. And what are those? What are the metrics? Because often we find that trials fall on their face because there isn't the level of engagement on the customer side to actually rally the right people to utilize the trial. There's a lot of gotchas in there. So it's a last case scenario. Try and build your sales process such that you're able to really uncover need, speak to that need through the value that you can provide, so you don't have to do a trial. I get that it's necessary sometimes. Also, use awesome, happy customer testimonials. And I know you don't want the same people getting phone calls all the time and emails and Zoom calls. So get a video from them, right? We find that very helpful. We find our customers find that very helpful. Where if you're trying to sell to a CMO and you have 4 other CMOs who give you a 4-minute testimonial, it's very, very powerful. And if you hear one of your colleagues or folks in your profession that's well respected talking highly about the solution, maybe it negates the need for a trial.
Absolutely. I'm a huge fan of customer testimonials. I love this concept of not just these old white papers, but getting videos and short snippets and being able to send it. And we've got a lot of awesome ideas in the chat too. Changing the verbiage from proof of concept to proof of value. I remember my first time hearing about a POC, I said, well, isn't the concept's already done? Like, the concept has been created. That's what this product is that we're selling. So I love this shift. And then also, getting into the procurement system and calling it more of a paid enterprise pilot. And it's showing, like what you said, Dave, that it shows that the customer has some skin in the game. It's not just, oh, well, we get to try it for free. And, because oftentimes they don't realize how much work. I know in cybersecurity, you get this software and then you get all these seats installed and you have this whole process just for them to say, man, never mind, it didn't work the way we thought we wanted it to. So I love this idea of a paid enterprise pilot. Kamara, what would you add? And from your experience, what have you seen to help make these trials more successful?
I think along the lines of what Dave was saying, if you really, really must put someone in a trial, which I typically stray away from, I don't do free trials at all. We do try to limit proof of concepts as well, or proof of value. I kind of like that term. But if you do really have to do that, it's typically because the prospect wants to get their hands on the tool to understand how it feels to work with it. And that's if you're speaking to someone that will be an end user of your product. So even with that, I would definitely do a requirements list and have an agreed upon plan of the items that must be met on that requirements list with the product and with their experience in the trial. But to take that a step further, I would also limit it by amount of time. So typically I would not want to do a trial that's longer than a week, because once you're getting into that second week, I mean, people start to lose engagement and don't necessarily know the ins and outs of the product like you would expect them to see value. So with that, I typically will do an enablement session as well to get them up to speed on how to leverage the trial and where they should really be spending time. And to some of the points in the chat as well, getting metrics around usage, where they're spending time, and kind of surfacing that to your prospect as a value add in any of your touches, whether that is in an email or in a call, that definitely helps as well, because you're showing that you know that they're engaged or not, and are helping them see more value from what they're engaging with or the areas they should be engaging with for their respective use cases. But, and yeah, bottom line, I think trials are just kind of one of those things where if you just open it up for somebody who's never really engaged with the platform before, they typically focus on just UX, and then all of the value goes out the window. So I would err on the side of caution with trials.
You know, there's one thing that all three of you mentioned. It's really this talking about what does success look like, and the setting the expectations. Some may even call it a mutual action plan. So let's dig into this a little bit. Andrew, I know this is one of your cup of teas. Like, how do you have that conversation? What's a good talk track for setting that expectation of, hey, we're going to keep to this, and this is what's going to happen if we choose not to keep to this? What does that look like?
Yeah, so mutual action plans, and for those on the line that don't know what that is, mutual close plans, think of it like a to-do list that you can create with your prospects on how to get the deal done, in the sense of to them signing the paper. Now, a couple things here, since we're talking about demos, how do we incorporate mutual success plans? You know, it depends on where in the process do you want to insert your litmus test. So think of a mutual action plan when you initially introduce it as a litmus test, because what you're doing there is you're saying, hey, we're going, oh, thank you for putting that in there, Katie, as well. What you're saying when you throw out a mutual action plan is yeah, setting dates is great, but what you're actually doing is a litmus test. You're saying, hey, we're going on this transformational journey. We're going to take you from A to B, and I'm going to show you how to get there with this plan. And what you do by putting this in front of the prospects here is you start to see a few different items. One, does this prospect know what the process is? Two, are they serious where they want to start laying out dates? And then three, how long is it going to take to get there, right? When can you forecast this thing? So mutual action plans are beautiful, right? Because they're like this sales judo move that you can insert in the process. And it looks like you have your stuff together, but really you're also using it as a test. So I can talk your ears off about mutual action plans, but go read my little newsletter that Katie put in the chat there, and hit me up, andrew.newborn@outreach.io, if you want to chat more. But yeah, mutual action plans are great. So demos, let's go back to that. Into your demo, right? Say that's the second piece of your process. Throw it in, right? Hey, at the end of this demo, I want to talk about how we can implement this use case that we just talked about for your own organization, right? Boom. You can do it there. Now, going to the mutual action plan, what's important there, since we were just discussing pilots, and I want to make sure people get value out of this, you know, tying it all together, is what you can do before you actually, right, is throw in a value conversation beforehand where you go through the ROI of your solution, right? And yeah, we all know that ROIs aren't super correct, but the goal here is to show the value this can provide. Now, in that session, what you could do is essentially talk about how long it takes to have a transformation, right? If you're selling a product that's going to have a huge impact, it's not going to take a week to implement, right? And if you make your prospect think that, they're going to think you don't know what you're talking about because they know their problem's going to be solved. If it's a big problem, it can't be solved in a week. So, for outreach, for example, for pilots, there's some prospects that are just trained. I want a 30-day pilot. And what you say is, well, what are you trying to get out of a 30-day pilot? Well, that's just what we're trained to say when we buy new products. What I do is I take them through that and I say, hey, look, if we go through the value here, it's going to take us 6 months to help you 2x your pipeline. So in doing a 30-day pilot, it's going to put a lot of stress on your team. We're going to have to move quick. List all the reasons why it's going to be very difficult, because trust me, no one wants another project on their plate, especially if they're evaluating something when their boss told them to do it, right? So, yes, mutual action plans. I'll stop there. I just said a lot, but utilize them. Talk value before you get in a pilot conversation. Make it sound like a hard and long process, and also show them that you're a truly transformational product. You're not going to get much out of a pilot, and it's just going to waste everyone's time, theirs and yours.
I love that. We got a great question from Giselle, and it's, how do you feel about weekly touch points for those that are getting close to closing? Too much, too little? She's starting to incorporate that. Dave, what would you say to that?
I'd say I think it's really important to always have a committed next step that you form with the customer or the prospect, and that it depends. There's no one right answer. It depends on the complexity of the deal and the length of the sales cycle. Often, a more enterprisey type sales cycle, as everyone knows here, is more of like your project coordinator. So yes, absolutely, that can be helpful. At the very least, though, I do think it's super important to ensure that at the end of each call, you're laying out next steps, who the owners are of each next step, so there's accountability, and definitely getting the next meeting on the books.
Kamara, what would you add?
I think the mutual action plan is an absolute must. I've always sold with one, but I've added to the mutual action plan, and it's not just what gets you to closing the deal. It actually incorporates some more. What's happening post-sale, start of implementation, maybe that first milestone of go live date, which is their target. Of course, moving dates after you close the deal dependent upon implementation, but it's a good way to get a holistic view of the entire deal and then also the customer journey as they become a customer. And it gets them to also, the prospect, to see that you're forward thinking and thinking about partnership long term and how you could be incorporating quarterly business reviews or those things that happen in post sales. So it's like you're almost treating them like a customer even though they're still in the sales cycle. So it definitely works, and prospects tend to love it, and they always will give you dates even if they aren't really realistic for the deal that you're trying to run. Maybe they have a really, really heavy goal and they want something done in a week from now. To Andrew's point, you can't promise that, right? Because you need to do discovery, understand their use case and implementation. But the mutual action plan lays it out nicely for you to get some of these dates.
I really like that. I'm a big fan of dates. So, love going on them with my husband, love having them in my calendar. But seriously though, I think it's so important, and it really sets that expectation and making sure you follow up with that. I think that's, you would think it's a lot simpler, right? You would think everyone knows, like, hey, if we have this date, this is what it means. But for so often, reps get caught up and they add all these things, but they don't take notes. They don't, have a great way to stay organized, and they forget these dates, and it happens. Real quick, because we still have a whole nother section to get to and only like 9 minutes left. How likely, if you offer a free trial, how likely is it that you think you're going to get the contract signed? Kamara, what do you think? Do you think if you offer the free trial, you'll more likely get the contract signed?
Just out the gates, or your discovery? No, I don't think the contract will get signed. I think it's a very low percentage, honestly. If I was going to give you a number, I'd probably put it at like 10% possibility of close.
Gotcha. Andrew, what do you think?
0% out of the gate. 100. Y'all do not do a trial like out of the gate. If there's one thing you take from this, do not do it. You need to, like, again, going back, it's all in the preparation, and that preparation to get executive alignment, people connected, you in touch with the right departments to discover what marketing wants, what sales wants, what operations wants. Like, half of this game is politics, right? Like, you're running a political campaign. And so by you just offering a free trial, getting in the hands of someone, you're not playing good politics, right? So you have to understand that like part of this is not that just your technology is cool and you have a great brand. It's like dealing with politics in an organization. As you go from S&D to smaller transactional deals to enterprise, that gets even like larger, right? So yeah, and part of running a pilot and why people want to do it most of the time, they've already said, if you get it to that point, it should be that people are already there. They just want to make sure their boss, they can tell their boss, hey, I'm checking the box. I did a pilot, and yes, it all went well. That's really all it is. And that, if you have to run a pilot, that's the point you want to get it to increase your chances of success. I love this stuff, so I'll stop talking. But there we go. Dave, Kamara.
The only segment I've actually seen trials have success in, the 10% number I was saying, is where it's a self-serve product that's been in the market for a very long time, like my very first logo I worked at, where it's easy to convert and also deploy. It's something very simple, and it's not something that requires an implementation or a solve for a specific use case. It's like a plug and play kind of technology. I agree with Andrew. Trials don't close because people don't know what they're doing and they can't see the full value as you would present it to them as a rep.
I love that. That's great. Dave, take us home on this.
All right. Well, I don't know definitively, I don't have enough data to say what percentage the chance of close, but what I do 100% know is that it will prolong the sales cycle. And we know also that time kills deals. So don't use it unless you have to. And what's kind of ironic here is, how much I love Sales Hacker, and I've got to know DemoStack over the last handful of weeks. Very, very cool offering. And I, as part of this, as a gift, I wanted to give a free trial of Replace Masterclass, not to convert anyone, but to give a free trial. Just so as the topic here is the best practices for discovery and demo, and we happen to have like 8 hours of videos on it. So hit me up on LinkedIn, and we'll give you a free trial for that. How's that for bringing it home?
I love that. That's great. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, we've really gone through the conversation of getting into the discovery call, getting into the heart of what people need, then figuring out how do we continue that conversation where it's easy and it's a low stress environment for our prospects, and then, like Kamara said, how do we transition that to becoming a trusted advisor and being there and being willing to disqualify and having those hard conversations of, hey, we can give you a free trial, but you're not going to be able to see the true benefit of what you could if you by just 1 week of having this. It doesn't work that way. And we also talked about using customer stories and videos as resources in lieu of those trials to really show like people do find value of it. This isn't just something our marketing tells us to say. And then going into creating that mutual action plan. If you're going to do a trial, setting time frames, setting expectations, having that conversation and how to have that conversation. As we look at wrapping up our conversation today, I would love to hear from every single one of you how you are enabling your teams, how your managers are enabling you, and what that looks like to be better at demos. Kamara, what is 1 or 2 things that your team is doing that's really helped you guys get a lot better at your demo process in the conversation in general?
Yeah. We are enabling our employees at the get-go. During onboarding, when they're coming into DemoStack, it is showing them the tool, teaching them the tool, getting them to start to use it. So I think pivoting away from the traditional approach of not really letting reps or even sales development reps into product, we're taking the opposite approach and getting people into the app and starting to use it. So I think enablement and just confidence in your workforce that they're capable of leveraging a software and a technology that even is new is the best way to go. That's been, I think, in my experience, the most helpful is just going in and using an app myself and getting a little bit of guidance from my teammates, whether that's product or enablement, that's giving you that guidance. But it's how we do it at DemoStack, and I definitely think everyone should be able to demo.
Absolutely. I love that. Andrew, what does it look like for the team at Outreach to make sure you guys are doing some stellar demos?
Yeah, a lot of things, but I'll focus on one thing I'm passionate about right now, which is I think 90% of sales is like copywriting. And I won't get into that, but I think a big one is we're a remote first world now, right? No one wants to hop on another Zoom call. So to get better at demos, I think what it is sitting down, writing out your demo scripts in a way that follows proven copywriting frameworks. So pain, agitate, solution, right? And I'm getting kind of technical here, but everything you show, right? You frame what you're going to show, right? And you frame it to how it's going to solve the problem versus just showing, hey, here's this, it's cool. Here's this, it's cool. So if I'm going to show you Outreach Kaya, which is our essentially our conversational intelligence tool, what I'm going to do that is I'm going to talk about your pain that I learned in discovery. See how we're tying it all back here. I'm going to agitate that pain on why, like, it is a huge pain, not only for you, but for our other customers before buying Outreach. And then I'm going to present the solution. And so I'm going to use that same framework before I show anything, right? To remind them, hey, this is the problem. I'm going to agitate it, and then I'm going to show the solution. So it's taking those frameworks there that really come from copywriting and then putting them on presentations, right? That for me is kind of, trying to do some judo moves here on demos, but that's the way I'm thinking about it now. And that way we can all have a more cohesive and standardized way of doing demos so that we can measure them appropriately.
I absolutely love that. And something that both of you kind of talked about, Andrew, not as much, but the enablement piece of really teaching others on your team and having that peer-to-peer support, I think is important. Dave, now really take us home.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think practice makes perfect. I think that's true. And I think half the folks on this call are leaders and enablement. And I think as leaders, we owe it to our team to build a coaching framework in place. So making sure you're taking the time to do those call reviews or being on calls with your team and not grabbing the wheel every time that things taking a left turn. You got to let the team fly into the mountain sometimes. I know my leaders in the past have done that for me, and that's where I've learned the most. And hey, if you don't have as much time as a leader, build a framework and ask your team to do peer reviews. And what a great growth opportunity. And if you're an individual contributor on this call and you're like, my boss never reviews my calls, hey, give them a bit of grace because it is tough being a leader and there's a million things going on, but take responsibility for your development and ask one of your peers or a couple of your peers that you respect that have a higher win rate than you to give you some feedback. That would be my closing thoughts.
Absolutely. One thing I just added in the comments, don't be afraid to coach up, always look for opportunities to step up and grow, not just as an individual, but help your team grow as well. This was an absolutely amazing session. We could probably break this into 3 different sessions and actually really workshop some great demo and discovery calls. I know, Dave, that's your forte. But we are officially at time, and I just want to say thank you so much to these amazing panelists. I dropped all their links into the chat as well. Make sure you connect with all of them. Thank you, DemoStack, for sponsoring this awesome session. And with that, I would love to hear from all of you. If you want to come to saleshacker.com, jump into the discussions, tell us what you liked. If you've got any follow-up questions, drop them there, and I'm sure we can get these awesome panelists to come and help respond as well. But for now, that is all we have. So thank you so much, panelists. And just a reminder, attendees, tomorrow we are going to do a Getting the Job workshop. So if you have wanted to learn what goes behind building a job description, if you want to understand job descriptions better, we're going to workshop job descriptions from some top software companies. We've got resumes from real community members we're going to be workshopping, so come and join us. And with that, I'll say have a fabulous rest of your afternoon, everyone.